Welcome to Life, Laughter, Divorce, episode 12. I am your host, Leanne Linsky.
And I'm the boyfriend.
Yes, you are.
So
hmm
this week, what do we have planned?
This week, boy, you have a very somber tone, which probably is very appropriate considering our topic today is very serious, which is domestic violence.
Yes. And we've done a little bit of research on our own to try to figure out what is the occurrence of domestic violence here in the US. And
Our minds have been blown, basically, with these numbers.
it's hard to believe that this many people have experienced it and it's not as a big of issue or a big of topic of discussion as it should be.
Considering that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been physically abused by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men. That's staggering. That's huge.
That's a lot. The stat that really gets me is every 9 seconds in the U.S. a woman is assaulted or beaten.
Mhm. And the other one, that I find tremendous is on a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive 20,000 calls.
And
20,000 calls a day.
that's a lot of calls. And again, it's not something that's talked about open in society.
Right. I mean, I'm not gonna sit down and have a coffee with a friend and suddenly this is the topic of conversation that comes up.
No, that would seem potentially uh, it would not be the norm,
No.
but we need to be talking
Talking
about
about it.
this.
Absolutely. And so that's why the boyfriend and I, we wanna bring these numbers to your attention. I mean, maybe some people already know about this, maybe some people don't, and maybe we're speaking to some people who know firsthand, how common this is. But yeah, we started looking at this and, one thing that I recall is, there's a time in your life where you think everything's great and you look at movies and you watch stuff and you think, how can any woman stay in a situation like that? And you think, oh, it could never happen to me. And then the next thing you know, you're in a toxic relationship that's bad. How do these things happen? And it's hard to imagine until you've actually walked in someone else's shoes. So, in case you're not familiar, you don't know firsthand, or you haven't talked to anybody about this, there's many reasons that a person would stay in an abusive
Yeah,
relationship.
so I haven't been in a relationship and I'm not an abuser, but I would be as a as just a person that again is ignorant to a lot of these ideas. You would think that hell, this is a bad situation. I should just get out.
hmm
And then a lot of people think that, well, what if you're in a bad situation, why don't you just leave? Because that is actually more difficult when you come to think about some of the issues that keep you there.
Right. And, I've always thought, oh, I could just walk out, I could do this. But when you're in that situation, things are different. It can be very complicated. I mean, relationships are typically complicated. There's a lot of inroads, outroads to them. And some of the things is when the victim is is ready to leave, they fear that the abuser's violent behavior will increase. And actually, in talking to some people and professionals about this, that is the truth. Violence typically escalates at the time that the abuser thinks or finds out that their victim is leaving. And that's usually when things get to be the worst. And a lot of times, so for the sake of this, we're going to call a person a victim and an abuser to clarify. Um, but if the victim goes and tells the abuser that they're leaving, things can get worse, and the abuser will prevent them from leaving, and maybe make threats, threats to keep children, threats to ruin reputation, threats, physical threats to harm them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a very scary place to be. It's very hard to get out of, and a lot of times the
So
victims
so
will need help.
so why doesn't someone just get up and leave? Why doesn't a victim just say to themselves, I'm going to get up and leave? And you don't have to necessarily tell the other person. just
Mhm.
get up and leave. Why wouldn't they
Well,
do that?
there's other reasons that someone might not do that. They might not be financially prepared to do that. And it seems like, well, if your life is at risk, what does money matter? Right. Um, Sometimes victims don't think their life is, uh, I mean, they'll know it's at risk. It's so complicated psychologically to go back, but they also might think that they're not, this isn't the problem, that they're the only person who can help their abuser. They know that there have been good times and they wait for those good times and they count on those good times happening again. So this is just a temporary thing. And they also think that maybe they're saving their abuser from something worse, and that if they leave, oh my gosh, what would happen to that person? It seems so black and white when you're standing on the outside of it, but I believe it's a completely different dynamic once you're in the midst of it. And it's very unclear, very hard to see. There's lots of gray there.
There's also some data that shows that victims love that other
Mm-hmm.
person, and they believe that other person will change,
Yep.
which, as we know, it's very difficult for people to change that kind of behavior.
Yep.
But when you're in that situation, it makes it a difficult choice.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then there's other reasons too. Is the victim may not know they have anywhere to go. They may not have a good support system. They may be embarrassed to let other know that they've been abused. And there's another big thing where people's religious affiliations or cultural backgrounds, leaving your spouse or partner is a big no-no. And, as crazy as it may seem to think on the outside, hey, this is your life and you're getting physically hurt from this. Why would any of that matter at this point? But it does, because this is
Well, that's
ingrained
their
from people
belief
of how they're
system of their life. Yeah, that
exactly.
would be tough to make that big of a life change and go against your beliefs. So
Hmm.
there's a multitude of reasons why a person would stay.
Right. And it's not cut and dry. It's usually very complicated. And that's why it can be a very touchy thing trying to help somebody in this kind of a situation, and it's probably a great idea to seek professional help. There are people who do this for a living. They help people get out of these horrible relationship situations and get them to a place of safety. So, in our research that you and I were doing, we actually found the national hotline for domestic abuse. 1-800-799-SAFE is the number, or 1-800-799-7233. Or you could actually go to domesticshelters.org. So we'll be sure to put that information in our show notes so you guys can check that out. So if it's not you, and I hope to God it's not you, or if you have a friend or a coworker or somebody that you think that could use that information, you have it. But these things are really tricky. They're not that black and white, and it's not a matter of just telling someone this is what you should do, because just them leaving alone could increase the chance of more violent physical abuse from somebody.
So this week we had a very interesting guest, and I'm going to let Leanne tell you about her.
This week's guest is a writer, comedian, producer, and mom from Lakewood, California. She has been known to perform at the Comedy Store, the Ice House, the Brea and Ontario Improv, and many other places in Southern California. And she actually has a book in the works about her comedy experiences entitled Always Running the Light: The Comedy Experiences of a Mom Turned Comedian. So I will let Carolyn share her story. Without further ado, here's Carolyn. All right, Carolyn. Carolyn is our guest today. Welcome to Life, Laughter, Divorce.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
Yes, we are. How are you today?
I'm great. It's Saturday and it's not raining yet. We have experienced some rain in the last 24 hours, right?
Oh my gosh, rain. We experienced flooding,
Flooding, exactly.
major flooding. So you drove in from
Long Beach.
so not very far.
Not
you
very far.
just a few blocks or so, because we're in Long Beach. That's where we're recording today. And you're here today because you've been divorced.
I have been divorced one time.
Well, okay. One time, and how long ago?
Oh my goodness. I was divorced officially as of August 25th, 1998. So almost 19 years. Is that right?
Well, you
Yeah.
got Leanne beat.
Yeah, you beat
Yeah.
me
Long
by
time.
yes, you did, because mine was in 99,
Oh, wow.
right? So it's
Your,
almost
your last one was in
yes, my
99.
last one was in 99. The 90s, while most people were out doing coke, I was getting married and divorced.
No, I've only been married the one time. In the 90s, I was busy being a mom. So
Oh, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
I have
Yeah.
2 great kids, 2 adult children.
2 good things came from that marriage, right?
Absolutely.
So how long were you married?
Oh, wow. Let's see. I got married Labor Day weekend of 1988.
Oh,
So quite a while. Almost
So-
10 years, like 2 weeks shy of 10 years.
we'll just say 10 years. Let's round
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
You know what I found recently? No, there's a big difference between 10 years and being married and divorced 10 years or over, under 10 years or over 10 years. And it may not have been back in the 90s, but now, if you're married over 10 years, it's like lifetime support for the other spouse.
You
If
bet
it's
it is.
Under 10 years, it's 5 years of support and then you're done. So there's a big difference between 10 years of marriage.
Really?
2 weeks, that 2 weeks is a huge difference.
I'm going to go
for-
to court and fight it, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Because he's been married 2 other times since me. And honey, I'm the only one that lasted that long. So believe me, I'm going after it.
Oh. Is there a statute of limitations, or can you
There
still go
should
over
be.
it?
I don't know. I
Oh
have no
my
idea.
goodness. I had no idea. I didn't know that.
Neither did I. I found that out recently. It's an
Heck.
interesting little tidbit of divorce here in California.
But both mine together didn't add up to 5 years, so I couldn't.
Oh.
So
yeah.
you're fine.
So,
You're good.
well, not that they would come after me for anything at this point, but oh my goodness, that's wow. Things you learn.
The things you need to know.
Yes. Everybody do your research before you do this. So you were married 10 years, 2 weeks short of 10 years.
Yes.
So what happened?
Oh, for goodness sake. We were so young when we met. We met signing up for the military, if you can believe that.
Both of you were?
Both of us were.
What
Yes.
branch?
He was going into the Marines and I was going into the Navy.
Really?
Really. And we met on St. Patrick's Day. So it's just really bad Irish luck. I don't know how else to explain it. But
Are you Irish?
we're both Irish. Yeah. So it's just really bad. But I'm half Italian. So, you know,
Mm,
that explains a lot.
maybe
So
that's what did it. So you met on St. Patrick's Day, signing up for the military.
that is correct.
And it was love at first sight?
No, I think it was more like lust at first sight because he was 19 years old and I was almost 21. So we were like really, really, really young
Oh.
and stupid.
It's-
So
And so he went into the Marines, you went in the Navy. How did that work? Because
I didn't actually go into the Navy. I got out of my contract to marry him, which is crazy, right? I know.
Oh, so this has happened fast.
Very fast. Less than a year. We met on St. Patrick's Day and we were married Labor Day weekend that year.
Holy
Yeah.
crap.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. Our parents were freaking out. So
Did you have a big wedding, a little wedding?
no, we went to City Hall and we got married and my dad was bored and went to Target. So yeah. True
I didn't
story.
even know they
I'm
had
not
Targets back then. They
Oh
did?
yeah, totally. Yeah,
Really?
they
I
had
remember
Targets.
Kmart's then, but I don't.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bootleg special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy. So your dad went to Target.
He went to, that's
Did
you
he buy
know,
you a
Did-
wedding
Did
gift?
you go to the ceremony too, or did you just?
well, again, it was a civil ceremony.
Yeah.
And we have pictures to prove it, but yeah, I think we went and got wine afterwards because I wasn't quite old enough to drink yet. And yeah, and that's kind of where we went with it.
Holy cow. So then.
So I'm due for a big fancy wedding. I'm overdue.
Yeah, you are. So when you did this, what happened? You married, and then how soon after did you guys go away? Because he probably had to go through boot camp and all that, right?
Well, he had a medical discharge. Basically, he had a hernia that
Okay.
needed to be operated on, and they gave him a medical with the option of going back into the military. And he didn't do that actually for another 10 years or so, but he did go back into the military after we were divorced.
So your medical issue was that he got married.
That's it.
Not a hernia.
That's exactly what happened. True stories are the best stories. That's right.
Whoa. He went back in 10 years later?
He did. He was having his usual February birthday midlife crisis. And every year he
He
would get really drunk on his birthday, which is February 21st, by the way. And it's coming up. So every year he has some kind of weird midlife crisis. And every year he's saying, "Hey, I'm going to go back in the military." And I said, "Yeah, okay, whatever." The one year he actually did.
Really?
He showed up at my door with my son and said, "I did it. I signed the paperwork."
And you were still married then?
No, we were divorced
Oh,
by then. We were
okay.
divorced. And I looked at the paperwork and then I called his mother.
Was that like the ultimate telling on
I
him with
said,
his mom?
"Listen, Sue, your son is here, and I'm just letting you know that he's going back in the military this time." And she said, I'm sorry, I'm
That's
just
okay.
totally blowing up, but give the phone to my son. And he got on the phone and there was some yelling and, it just kind of went from there. But yeah, he went back in.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice. So,
Crazy
okay,
story. I know.
so that's a change of life. So all those years, so you had 2 kids,
Right.
and then what transpired that ended up in divorce?
Well, again, we were really young, and I think there were several issues on a serious note that contributed to the divorce. I think the most serious was physical abuse. And that
Oh,
was really, really hard for me, of course, because I was the recipient of the physical abuse. But you learn a lot from that and you grow from that because I had never experienced that in my life. I grew up with a mother and father who loved each other very much, and there just wasn't that element going on in my household. So, yeah.
that's
That's deep. So
Yeah,
do
we
can we?
shifted gears a bit.
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
okay.
So how many years did this go on for the entire marriage?
Well, the entire time that we were together, I would say the abuse actually didn't start until about 6 months into the marriage.
That's
Yeah.
quick. I mean, 6
Yeah.
months is a long time, but it's not a
Right.
long time.
It's really not. It's really not. And there was just no way I could defend myself. He was a very tall, 6'2", strapping Marine.
And
And I
you,
am not a strapping Marine. I'm a little petite, 5'2".
yeah, and you
Yeah.
had only known each other about a year at that
About a
time,
year. About a year.
and it
Yeah.
started. And did you think it would end, or that you could change him, or how did this get to go on? I mean,
Honestly, it started so
subtle,
subtly. Yeah, it was just he was twisting my arm a bit, and I really didn't think much of it at the
right?
time. And then it just progressed. And then when I found out I was pregnant with my son, the abuse became more prevalent. Yeah, and that was pretty much the breaking point for me. I just, when you go through something like that and you experience that kind of abuse while being pregnant, it does change who you are without
Absolutely,
question. So,
absolutely. It
but
breaks you.
you overcome it. You
And how
do.
did you do that?
Well, aside from getting a divorce, obviously, I had therapy and counseling and a lot of supportive family and friends, that were there for me when I went through this.
Well,
So,
before you went through the therapy and getting help and whatnot, how did you cope within that relationship for that long period of time? I mean, of 10 years,
well, I
basically.
wasn't with him the whole time. I
Okay.
basically left after I had given birth to my son, and we were married on paper,
Okay.
so to speak. So I guess actually, as far as living with him, I want to say it was more like 2.5 years. But on paper, we were still married. Yeah.
Phew.
Yeah.
2.5
Wow.
years is still,
That's still a long time to.
It's a lot.
and
Yeah.
so as you said, that kind of thing does usually happen gradually. I mean, because then you keep thinking, oh, it's a one-time thing, it's a small thing. Oh,
Exactly.
maybe it's me, maybe I shouldn't have done that. You're kind of trying to explain it. Is
hmm
that
I think you try and blame yourself for things that you shouldn't be, and you try and rationalize the behavior. At least that's what I tried to do. And, looking back years later, of course, there is no rationalization. Abuse is abuse. And,
absolutely?
unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way, and hopefully, with both of my children, I've expressed to them, what is appropriate behavior in a marriage and in a relationship and what isn't, especially with my son, because I wouldn't want them to have to experience anything that I went through.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, before that had happened, I mean, you were a young girl and you
hmm
had dated before, I'm
Oh,
guessing?
of course.
Right.
No.
So in your mind, like, thinking back, because I know when I think back to that time in my life and I
Mhm.
thought, "Oh, if a man ever did this, I would be gone so fast." We always think
You think
you
that.
think
Right.
in your head that
Mhm.
I would handle it this way or I would handle it that way, and we never suspect that, we would become that woman,
Right.
right?
Right.
And when did you realize that you had become that woman? When was the switch for you?
Well, I think, initially I didn't pay a lot of attention to it because I was so busy and working and doing other things. But when I became pregnant with my son, it was just so obvious that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. And when I started experiencing physical abuse while pregnant, I think that was just this huge red flag like, well, how do I get out of this? And I was terrified. I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to tell anybody. And I think that's another issue that needs to be addressed, with women especially. They feel like they have nowhere to go. And, that kind of mentality has to change. We have to be open to discussing it so that way it doesn't repeat itself.
And how did you change that for you?
Well, I mean, frankly, I'm talking about it,
Yeah.
and hopefully, even if I help one person, recognize what abuse is, because there's more than one form of abuse out
Mhm.
there,
Absolutely. There's
you know.
emotional abuse, there's physical
You
abuse, and
bet.
it creeps
It
very
does.
gradually.
Mhm.
When you were back at that time, was it when you were pregnant suddenly and I don't have children, but I'm guessing from what I've heard from other women,
Mhm.
um, that the minute you're a mother or you're pregnant, your instincts are protective and
Absolutely.
nurturing. And was it more about protecting that baby than almost yourself?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty true. And I kept thinking, "Oh, this is gonna blow over, whatever." And it just never did. It got worse. And I think one instance, I remember I was maybe about 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he actually picked me up and dropped me on my bathroom floor. And I hit my toe and I broke my big toe. And he accompanied me to the hospital. I remember this really well. And I was terrified because I thought, "Oh my god, somebody's going to figure out what's going on here."
Mhm.
And he's a big guy and he was basically, at that time kind of threatening me saying, "If you tell anybody here what happened, you're going to pay for it when you get home." So it's like, "Oh my god, what do I do?" You know?
You have more fear.
Terrified. Just terrified.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, like you were saying, you woman when we're in a position where we're not being treated correctly, we tend to find blame on ourselves or try
Mhm.
to figure out or explain it away. And in your case, when you had that shift, when you were pregnant and you had that
Mhm.
shift, how did you decide to reach out and who did you reach out to?
Well, I reached out, again to family and friends, and I was very lucky that I was able to leave that situation.
And how did you get out? Because that's a very difficult situation because from what I understand is,
Mhm.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but typically in whether it's an emotionally abusive relationship or physically abusive, if you tell the abuser that you're leaving, the abuse tends to get worse right before that point. That's when it can escalate.
It did at some level. I would say it did escalate.
Did
Yeah.
you tell him that you were leaving?
Yeah, I eventually, because we ended up basically I couldn't work because I was getting closer to my due date. He wasn't working at all, and I was basically the one covering all the bills at that point. When I left, we both left to go stay at his mom's house in the valley. And, I had gone into labor, given birth to my son, but at one point I knew I had to leave. So I did leave. I had a friend come pick me up with her husband, and I took my son and I left. And I basically came back to Long Beach and relocated here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you were going through this, did
Mhm.
your friends know what was happening or have any idea before you told
No,
them?
no, they really didn't have a clue.
So when you reached out to this friend to get out,
Mhm.
did you tell her what was going on or did you just
I really didn't. I really didn't go into great detail with it, but I had what's called postpartum depression
oh geez.
and was hospitalized for it. And then everybody kind of figured out what was going on. By the time I had talked to a doctor about what was going on, it wasn't just postpartum depression, it was the abuse in addition to that. So it was severe.
Absolutely. I
Yeah. And
wouldn't doubt
again,
it.
it's a forum now where people are talking about postpartum, where back then it was like nobody really talked about it. So
Mhm. Yeah, and so many things we don't talk about.
no, you
We're
really don't.
Nobody talks about these things, yet so many people are
But so
affected
many
by
people
them.
experience it, and I had no idea what it was. I had never been pregnant. I had never like had a child before, so how was I supposed to know what it was?
Right. And
Yeah.
if you're going through an abusive relationship, did you find that you isolated yourself quite a bit?
Honestly, I guess because we were so far away from where I grew up, I didn't have a lot of family and friends out in the Palmdale, Lancaster area. That's where we were living when we were married. And then again in the valley, I didn't really have that network like I do here.
So right after you got married, you moved away.
Right.
Interesting. And that's another sign
Yeah.
of living with
Of
an
course.
abuser is they remove you from your support system. You
That's
move
exactly
away.
right.
Everything happens very quickly.
Mhm.
It's almost a sign of a
Yeah.
extreme narcissist or a sociopathic tendency, right? Am
Yeah.
I right?
I mean, yeah, to call it out. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And that's something that we never talk about.
No.
Women or people in general never hear about
Yeah.
is there are people out there when you get into a relationship, and I've read a ton about this because I've encountered these people, but is
Okay.
the relationship moves along so quickly, it's almost like you're bombarded and you don't really
Right.
right?
It was very fast.
So he kind of swept you off your feet
Yes.
and then it was after so his behavior was good, 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 and then you married, and then what was the first sign that you noticed that things changed?
Honestly, I want to say that if I can remember, it was maybe 6 months into the marriage. I had come home from work and he was angry about something I had cooked incorrectly and he twisted my arm backwards. And I thought that was really unusual because he had never done anything like that before.
Mhm.
And I didn't really know what to think. I thought, well, why is he doing this? And again, I was very young, so not really understanding the dynamics of what was really going on underneath the surface. I just figured, oh, he's mad. I burned his
Wow.
dinner, which is ridiculous. You don't go and twist somebody's arm because you burned their pork chops,
Oh my
okay?
god, if
You
someone
know.
if that were the case, then I wouldn't have any limbs left at this point for my cooking.
You're a wonderful cook.
But I learned how to cook after that, after I divorced him. So I'm a great cook now.
Yeah. Well, now you have positive reinforcement, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So that's incredible. When you got away and everything, okay, so you got away, you're walking away from an abusive relationship, but on
Yeah.
top of that, you're suffering from postpartum.
Right.
How did you come out of that? What was your recovery like? Like, how did you get through that?
It took quite a while. The depression and just being in the hospital and having to deal with all this stuff. And then, you know, he was in charge of taking care of our son, who was an infant at that time. Our son was placed into foster care, so we had to go through all these channels. It
More
was just like one big soap opera, seriously.
That's
Yeah.
extreme stress
Yeah, a lot.
because you're in the hospital. How did you
Well,
handle
when
that?
I came out of the hospital, that's basically what was going on because my ex-husband wasn't able to take care of my son properly. And he was young and inexperienced and really didn't know how to take care of a baby. So, yeah.
Wow.
So we had to go to court. It was just one big drama,
And how
basically.
long did that take to get through?
Oh, wow. I want to say my son was like an infant, like 4 to 6 months old, and we went to court. I would say a good part of a year. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I just
I know. It's
that's
kind of shocking when people hear this, like,
well, I
oh my
have
goodness,
and again it goes back to you never think it can happen to you until it happens to you,
Exactly.
right? We
Right.
all think we're above and beyond all of that, but
Mhm.
you didn't like nothing came up. People behave normal. We go into a relationship. You're optimistic. Someone sweeps you off their
Mhm.
feet. You think the world of them. Things are going right. And the first sign of trouble, you like, well,
Mhm.
okay, that's once, and that wasn't a big deal. And
Right. You
right,
dismiss it.
you dismiss
You
it,
do.
and it goes on, and then the longer it goes on, the deeper you are in this
Yeah.
whole mess, and now you have a baby.
Right.
You're not
Right.
well, and so it took you some time. And did you have any family support or?
Well, at that point, my parents had kind of stepped in a little bit, but they were still trying to stay out of it in the sense that, it wasn't their marriage. It was their grandchild, but they were there on the sidelines. I guess that's a good way to put
But
it.
they were trying to be neutral parties and
Right.
not
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the first sign that things started to get better after that?
Well, again, after I went to counseling, I want to say it really did help, and I want to say that the counseling that actually helped me was after my daughter was born, because again, I became pregnant after that with my daughter. And
From your husband?
that's right.
So you went back to
I
him.
went back, we tried to work things out. I ended up getting pregnant, and he didn't want me necessarily to continue with the pregnancy, and I went to my parents and I said, "Listen, I'm not going to discontinue this pregnancy just because he doesn't want me to have it." And I left.
At this point, how many people in your circle knew what really was going on?
They knew at that point.
Yeah.
They knew. They knew we were trying to work things out in spite of everything that had happened for the sake of our family and our children, But I left him when I was pregnant, and I went to go stay with my parents.
Do you think that's a difference in the times though? Because
Absolutely.
now I think if you hear about that, they just tell the woman or the person who's being abused to leave the relationship
Yeah.
instead of going back to try to
To
fix
work it out. Yeah.
It is what it is, and you're not going to change. You most likely are not going to change
No.
that situation.
No, you're not.
And to having to go back and try it again, that's another stress. So you went through the 1 year with the
Mhm.
child and with your postpartum and with dealing with this internally and having some support from family and friends to
Right.
going back
And
and
trying.
trying again
That's
and getting
exactly
pregnant
true.
with your daughter and then
Right.
getting this information from him where he doesn't want you to continue it.
Mhm.
That must have been one hell of a 2-year ride.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I wasn't trying to get pregnant. My daughter, thank God, is old enough to understand what, how she came to be. But at the time, the sponge was very popular. And what I didn't know at that time was apparently if you had given birth,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't recommended.
Really?
Yeah. And, they had that infamous Seinfeld episode with Elaine
Mhm.
hoarding sponges and everything. So I referred, jokingly to my daughter that you're the sponge baby for sure, because I definitely didn't want to get pregnant. That was not the plan. I was just going to go try and work out the marriage and everything. But, things happen.
Yeah. When in hearing your story, what keeps coming up is the things that we're not told.
Yeah.
Things that we don't know until they happen to us.
Right.
And yet they're so common.
Oh, absolutely. They're common. Yeah. I mean, I know I've talked to other friends and other family members that have experienced abuse, and they all seem to have the same thread of truth. Everybody's afraid to
Talk
tell
about
their
it.
story, and everybody's afraid to kind of be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not helping anybody.
And I didn't know that about the sponge. I'm throwing them all away.
Yeah,
No,
throw them all
I don't
away if you have
any
them.
of but that is something, because here you went back to him. How was it? Now, were you in counseling when you went back to him?
No, I had stopped the counseling because it was basically the court that decided I had to go to counseling along with him because, again, my son was in foster care just to prove that we were stable, whatever it was, whatever the courts wanted back then. And I went back to counseling after I left him and had given birth to my child, my second child.
Did you go back to the same counselor? Or
No. No, I went to an entirely different therapist. And, that was really a turning point because I was able to be honest about what really happened in the marriage, why I ended up getting married in the first place, just a lot of issues that maybe I hadn't looked at before.
I would imagine so. And
Yeah.
how did you pick your new counselor? What were your kind of...
I was referred by a friend to this counselor, and he was actually really good. So
Nice. And you said so you went to a
I
male
went to a male
counselor,
counselor. Yeah.
which a lot of women wouldn't do. Like,
Right.
sometimes people go to people that they can relate to. So I'm always curious as to how
Yeah.
people choose somebody. And now, with your kids, you were raising them on your own at this point.
Well, that's a whole nother issue. That was drama, with him, because it was, I guess, similar to what the movie The Parent Trap is about. He had one and I had one. And we were still legally married. And so we basically had to go to court because he kept saying that he was going to file for divorce. It never happened. And then he was threatening to take both the children and go to Arizona. And it was just idle threat at that until I got served with divorce papers on Valentine's Day. And in the court, yeah, what a great guy, huh?
I just
Such
posted
a
something the
winner.
other day about Valentine's Day, serving papers on Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're kidding. And
No.
so how come you didn't file for divorce?
Again, I was hoping that maybe things would eventually work themselves out, that he would acknowledge what he did to me, which he basically didn't do until after we were divorced.
So when he served your
Yeah.
papers on Valentine's Day, did you say okay?
Well, he didn't personally serve me, but yeah, I got the
Yeah.
papers and I had told him, I said, listen, if you're going to serve me with real divorce papers, not pretend divorce papers, make sure that that's what you want because I'm going to follow through with it. And sure enough, I got those papers on Valentine's Day. I started crying because I knew that was the beginning of the end of this. But it was like a sense of relief too. It's like, it's time. It's really time to do this. And I called my friend whose parents were paralegals. I said, listen, he finally served me with divorce papers. He's threatening to take both the kids out of the state, blah, blah, blah. So, they said, oh, well, we're on board. We're going to do all your paperwork. We're good. And he just assumed that I was going to lay back and sign the papers and he was going to get to take the kids and that was going to be the end of it. Well, let me tell you.
He was a little surprised.
Let me tell you. I showed up with a legal pad and notes and everything that I wanted. And I laid out everything that I wanted as far as, custodial rights, what I wanted with visitation, just basically everything you can imagine. And he was floored.
I would
He was
imagine.
not expecting that. A normal session with the court takes about maybe 20 to 30 minutes. We were in chambers like 3 hours going over the details of what I wanted out of this.
And
Yeah.
was it pretty simple after that? Or did
No.
he really?
No.
He fought you.
Oh, yeah. Tooth and nail.
And how long did your divorce take overall?
It took to finalize everything about a year.
It's a long time.
So reasonable, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we were fighting mostly over the kids.
Which is a important thing to fight over. If
Oh,
you're gonna
yeah.
fight over something. And so you finalized this in August of 98,
Right.
right? August 25th. I
Right.
remember. And how has your life changed since?
Oh my God. It's been ridiculous. He's been married 2 other times. Each wife left him within a year. And the
Mhm.
last one cleaned him out financially.
Good for her, right?
She even took the pots and pans from what I understand. So, and oddly enough, his second wife contacted me on Facebook and we're Facebook friends, which is real interesting. That both wives are remarried too,
Now,
on top of
did
it.
either of those wives ever ask you about your experience with him, and did they have the same
Yes.
experience?
Yes. The second wife that I'm actually friends with on Facebook, we have communicated and talked. Yeah, she did want to know what was going on because he presented a very different picture of me when he was getting ready to marry her. And,
Mhm.
being that he went back in the military, unfortunately for him, when he came back from his first or second tour, he had a very bad PTSD meltdown, so to speak. So,
That's unfortunate.
yeah. So it happens. It happens.
Right. And I'm guessing so they had the same experience. So you've probably I would feel good if I heard that from my ex's ex-wife, like
Right. Well,
that
she
things
wanted
didn't
to
work out, but
confirm, was I really this bitch on wheels that he portrayed me to be? And I come to find out I wasn't. So,
hmm.
yeah.
So the nice things is you found these things out, but outside of that, how has your life changed?
Wow. Well, I mean, I've had a few long-term relationships and I'm dating, but I've never remarried.
Is that by design? Like, do you want to be remarried or
I'm looking forward to doing it someday. Yeah. I just haven't quite found the right guy. I guess that's, it is what it is. And I'm going to be 50 this year.
Ooh.
So it's like, okay, let's do it. I'm going to be 50. Let's do it.
Well, when you were out there and so your divorce got finalized, things probably started turning around for you, right?
Right.
And everything gradually.
Mhm.
How did you see a change in yourself? What changed within you, do you think most?
Honestly, I just became a little bit more confident in who I was as a person. Both of my parents passed away. I didn't really have anybody to rely on other than myself, and it does change you,
It does.
because you have two small children to take care of. And, both of my children are type 1 diabetics on top of it. So that was like an added responsibility to monitor them. And they had several, health issues come up over the years. So
Kind of changes your focus a bit,
it does.
I
It's
would
not all about
imagine.
you. It
No.
isn't. And it becomes about your children and what's best for them. So
Yeah. Did you what was like the number one thing that you started doing that helped regain your confidence?
honestly, I went back and converted to Catholicism, which is kind of an extreme thing maybe to do, but it has always had been my comfort zone to be involved in a church. And I knew that, I wanted my children raised with a sense of values and community, and that was a great way to do it.
That's interesting because most people nowadays
Hmm.
don't affiliate themselves with a church of any kind or a religion
Right.
or things of that nature. It's becoming more common actually to be um, agnostic or atheist, right?
It is a
It,
common thing. And I guess, because I embraced Catholicism and being a Christian as well, um, it really did help me. It did give me inner strength. And I made, many friends at the parish that I ended up
mhm.
working at, becoming a youth minister for 5 years, which is a whole nother story. But yeah, I got a lot out of my faith. And I
which
knew
is
that God was always present.
which is important that you found a support system and you
Absolutely.
found some sort of hope
Right. For sure.
basically in
Yeah.
that, which is huge. And I think going through something like that and feeling so broken, I know in my experience and situations where
Hmm.
you kind of lose hope or things are not going
Going the way
well,
they should. Right.
yeah, at all. um feeling hopeless is the worst thing, is the
Hmm.
worst feeling in the world, and having a place to reach out to that gives you inner strength of some sort, whatever that may be spiritually,
Hmm.
is really important.
Absolutely, it
And
is.
to do something like that, so once you found your place in the church and doing that, what other areas of your life did you see change?
Well, again, I was a single parent, doing what I could to take care of my kids. I was in a long-term relationship with somebody for 10 years. I'm still friends with this person. In fact, he's the one that dropped me off today and bought me Valentine candy, which is a whole nother issue. But it's like,
Oh, very
okay,
nice.
he's a great guy. It's great to be friends with people that is your ex, and he's moved on and he has a great girl that he's with, but we're still friends.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it is.
It shows a lot of growth. And also, do you feel better when you're dating? Do you feel now I know, like, if I go through a breakup or something like that
Hmm.
in the past, or when I went through my divorces, especially the second time, I started questioning my choice in men, or what I was looking for, and
Hmm.
kind of trying to redefine what that was and what I was doing wrong, because obviously I was a common denominator in these things
Hmm.
and what I could change in me. What How did that affect, like, your choice in dating people? Like, now you said you weren't sure you found the right person and stuff. Is it that, or is it, do you not trust your choices? Maybe that, do you feel like you're choosing the wrong person? That's kind of a long question.
Wow, that's
So
a
I
long
guess,
question.
okay, so I guess my question is this. Let me back that up. So my question is, do you- how has your experience changed what you're looking for in a man?
I guess growing up, I had a certain type. I think we all have a type in our minds. And I guess in the last maybe 7 or 8 years, I've experienced dating other cultures and specifically Latino men, which seems to be what I'm attracted to. And I never dated Latino men growing up. It was always your boring white guy. No offense. But yeah.
None taken.
You know, but it's like, okay, for whatever reason, that's kind of what I'm drawn to. And also Jewish guys. And which I find kind of interesting because I'm not Jewish, but it's an interesting culture, interesting people, and they feed you a lot. So it works out for me.
Hey, getting fat is not all bad.
But it's nice to be able to experience different types of people and cultures and be out of my comfort zone.
What do you feel like reaching outside of white men or going into different cultures or backgrounds or religious differences, right?
Hmm.
Is that different than what your ex-husband was? Are you trying to get as far away from him as possible?
I mean, no, I wouldn't say that necessarily. But like I said, every year he seems to have a midlife crisis. And his birthday is like in a few days. And this year's midlife crisis, apparently he's decided to become Mormon, which is like, oh, wow, that's new. Okay, let's explore that.
What was he when he?
Well, he just converted to Catholicism maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm thinking, okay, you didn't really give the church very much time, but okay, you do whatever makes you happy and we're good. Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know what else to say about that.
No. Do you talk about your divorce and stand up?
Not too much, honestly. He's always threatening to sue me, which I talk about on stage, for defamation of character. It's one of my lines on stage. And I always say that, I'm not really surprised that he's going to sue me. I'm just surprised that he knew what defamation of character meant. So be that as it may, he hasn't sued me yet. He's probably waiting till I make it really big. And then he's going to try or attempt
Right.
to, go after me.
Or
So.
maybe when you write a book about it. Or
Well, I'm in the
something.
works of writing a book. So,
Well, hopefully he won't listen to this podcast then.
well, he may. That's okay. He can listen.
All right.
No worries.
So when did you get into comedy and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, my son actually is the precursor for this. He is the really funny one in the family, and he does these really amazing impersonations. And I went to one of his shows here in Long Beach at Gaslamp. I'm sure everybody
Yeah.
knows where that is. And it's been a few years ago now. And I was there sitting backstage, and a few of the comedians asked me when I was going up. And I said, well, I'm not a comedian. I'm here to see my son. And they said, oh, well, what would it take for you to get up on stage? And I said, well, I'll do anything once for the right price, and next thing I know, I'm going on stage in a few weeks. So it's like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I bomb, nobody
Right.
laughs. And that's not what happened. So it just kind of snowballed from there. I don't know how else. And my background's really in writing and journalism. So I'm good at observing things and writing and seeing a lighter side of things. And that's kind of how it all evolved. Yeah.
Did you keep a good? Have you always had a good sense of humor, and did that help you?
I think so. I wasn't really the class clown. I was editor of the school paper and student council, this and that. It wasn't really class clown. That wasn't really me. I was more the studious bookworm type.
Did you, when you were going through this, did you keep a journal? You like to write.
I have journals all over my room. It's a little ridiculous, notes and things that I've tried on stage and things that have worked, things that haven't worked. And, it's a process.
But did you write at the time that you were married and you were going through
Oh,
all this hard time?
no, it probably would have helped a lot. Had I kept a journal during that time, it probably would have helped.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, so you don't really talk about this
Well,
some of this
no,
would be hard.
it's kind of a downer at a
Yeah.
comedy show.
So
You
you'd
know,
sell
let's
more
not go
drinks,
there.
right?
Well, I probably would. You'd probably need to, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever talk about it a lot before
Just privately,
with
friends, family.
counseling?
But I mean, the more you're in the public eye and the more people you meet, sometimes you're more open to talking about it because so much time has passed. And you're just hoping that maybe someday, that somebody hears your voice and you are able to get through to them. Like whatever's going on in your relationship, if you question it, if red flags are going off, you probably should look at that closely and not just dismiss it.
What would you suggest, like a piece of advice, if there's someone out there going through this or in an abusive relationship? What advice would you give them?
Honestly, to make a plan, and to seek out family and friends that you trust and find a way out. Find a way out. Even if you have to borrow money to do it, whatever you got to do.
Is it true? I've been reading on this and stuff, and as a woman, I think when going through a divorce and things like that, no matter how good the divorce is or how amiable it may be,
Mhm.
I can't, thinking about your experience and how bad it was financially.
Oh, it's
Was
devastating.
was this like was that holding you back most?
Absolutely, that was part of it. Yeah, because, how much money do you really have at 21 years old? You don't.
Mm-hmm.
You don't.
And you have babies to take
And
care of,
babies. Yes.
and they're expensive.
Of
So
course.
if money weren't an issue, how hard would it have been to leave?
Oh, honey, I would have been out the door. Done. With no babies? Oh, no.
Really?
No.
So it was financial.
A lot of it. Sure.
Was there
And
any
fear. Just fear of where am I going to go? What am I going to do?
kind of like what was in your mind? What would have Did you picture yourself on the street had you left?
That
Like,
was the thing. I didn't know what else to do. I was just kind of paralyzed. Yeah.
yeah. But the truth is, I think most of us think at our worst times, like even if we look at it as like, oh, what if I lose this job?
Mhm. Mhm.
Then what? Or what if I quit this job? I don't have something, and we have that fear, and that
Right.
fear holds us back so much of not knowing what could possibly happen. But then when you look at it, it's like, okay, I've
Mhm.
survived everything so far,
Exactly.
and I do have friends, I do have family. Not necessarily that they're going to put up tons of money or something, but somehow it always works out.
It does. It does. You find a way out and you usually become a lot stronger because of it.
Yeah. What was your number one coping mechanism?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't drink, so
That's a fortunate.
um I don't know that I really had a coping mechanism during the time I was married because again, I was just afraid and not really sure where to go. So, I think, again, it goes back to my faith in God and believing and trusting that there was a plan for me and I just had to follow the plan and try and discover where I needed to be. Yeah.
What was if you had a lesson that you learned out of all of this?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. There's so many lessons. I guess the number one thing is not to rush into a relationship with anyone, to
Mhm.
really take your time getting to know that person. But even at that, I was in a long-term relationship with somebody, and there's no guarantee it's going to end up in a marriage. I was with somebody for almost 10 years. We did not get married.
Why is that?
You know, sometimes things just don't work out. You can be the best of friends, but the marriage in and of itself doesn't work out for a variety of reasons.
Mhm.
And we're good friends now. It's just,
Wasn't meant to be.
I don't know that it was meant to be. Yeah. I kind of fit his picture of what he wanted, and he kind of fit my picture at that time.
So it was one of my favorite things is it was meant to be, but it was meant to be over.
Kind of.
So it's
Yeah.
kind
That's
of
a good
like
way of putting it.
gave you exactly what you need for that time.
Yes.
And then when you got what you needed and you both grew at the same
Mhm.
time, you grew apart, and now but you're still friends, which
Absolutely, we are.
it kind of evolved.
Yeah. Hmm.
So one thing I've taken from your visit with us and talking with us today is that you and you sort of said this is that you wanted no one talks about this, about these kinds of abusive relationships. So most women don't know what to do or how to, or what how to deal with the situation. So from your experience, and now that you have a voice that could potentially help someone else who's out there, what do you recommend to a woman who's going through this today?
Listen to your inner voice. If something is telling you that this doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right, if it's even just a off color remark, or something so subtle as maybe a slap, or something that you're not really thinking is abusive, but it just doesn't feel right, follow your instincts. Don't be afraid to follow your instincts.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then because of all of the routes that you took to with family support and
Mhm.
church and everything else, I'm sure we're going to post this in
Hmm.
our notes and things of
Sure.
where women can go find assistance and help
There
and
and there are
There
places.
are shelters, there are
Yes.
places to go, and more so now, I think, than 30 years ago,
Yeah.
you
And you can
know?
actually call some of these places and ask questions. If you if you're not sure, I mean, I've been in a situation where I actually reached out and asked questions because again, this is something that people don't talk about.
Mhm.
Women don't talk about, and they're embarrassing questions because you kind of feel uh,
You
like
feel ashamed.
ashamed and
You
stupid. Like,
do.
do I actually have to ask this question?
Yeah.
But let's say, there are places and they're very anonymous. You can call and ask questions. There's even places where you can call and take classes.
Yes.
Um, I know locally and in all cities across the United States, I think you can usually find something where they can offer you a free help
Mhm.
and you can ask questions and educate yourself on this. And it's not necessarily even if you're going through this yourself, maybe you have a friend going through it and you're not sure if you need to reach out and you need to do something, you can always call these people. These people are professionals. They deal with it every day and they're going to give you an open and honest answer. They don't have any reason to do otherwise.
Right.
And you can usually find them and you can Google it for
You can Google everything.
everything. You can Google it. And I'll be happy to put some of this in the show notes and
That's a
whatnot
great idea.
and put it on the website. But I do think that's a very good point because not everybody feels they can go to their family,
That is true.
and not
Yes.
everybody. And and I've talked to women too, where I don't want to tell my family because my family's gonna think I'm crazy, or they're gonna shrug it off, or they'll take sides, and it gets to be a dramatic thing. And it's
Mhm.
good to know that there are places out there that if you don't have any money, you don't need money. There are places that are gonna help you.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
not alone and you're not going to end up on the street. And it's
Right.
and living and getting a shelter from a women's shelter is not like living in a homeless
No, it's
shelter
not
and
the same
it's not the
thing.
same
No.
thing. And so there are avenues to assist and whatnot and be very safe and discreet about it.
Mhm.
but I think the thing that you said first about trusting your instincts, that's incredibly important. A lot of people don't do that. They don't
No.
trust their own thought. They try to convolute it with what about this? What about this? What about this? Trust your trust your
Trust
instincts.
that
Trust it.
inner voice, that
Yeah.
instinct that's telling you that this isn't right.
Yep.
Yes.
And do what you need to do to leave.
And nobody should be living in fear every day.
No.
No.
And if you're in that place where you're waking up and your stomach is in knots, you're not in the right place.
No.
That's not normal. So, well, you've been wonderfully open and honest and sharing your experience.
Well, thank you for that. I hope that, somebody out there listens to this and does reach out and get whatever help they need to get out of a particularly bad situation.
I hope so too. So, thank you. Thanks for that. And is there anything else you wanted to add or
Well, I'm going to be 50. I'm still looking.
So life goes on
Still
and
looking. Life
do
goes
you have
on.
good stories now and happiness?
Oh, great stories. Yeah. No, my kids are amazing. My son is going to be 27. My daughter's 24. And I love my kids. I love my life. And there's nothing wrong with being single.
No, there's not.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's a lot of freedom in there.
Yes. Yes, there is. But, I'm surely open to getting married at some point, and maybe it'll be this year. Who knows?
Well,
You never know.
you
I
don't want to
mean,
rush into
well,
anything.
no.
But are you dating somebody now?
I'm dating a few people actually, but that's a whole nother situation. No one's like serious. I've gotten my one friend, who will remain nameless, but he keeps proposing marriage, but it's kind of a joke because we've been friends forever. We met at the Laugh Factory a few years ago when I was first really starting out doing comedy. And it's kind of a funny story because Kevin Nealon was there the same night, and he remembers this really well. I don't really remember the story. But apparently him and Kevin Nealon were both trying to get my phone number, which I think is hysterical. And he's the one that got it. He ran to the bar, got a napkin, got my number, and we're still friends. And he's a great guy. So, but he keeps saying, "So are we getting married? What's going to happen?"
And what is your answer?
I said, "Of course. Sure, why not? You busy next weekend?
So
We're good."
are you gonna show up on his doorstep in a white dress one of these days until
Oh
he
no,
surprises?
I told him I'm going to put him through the hoops. He really has to really propose and go over the top with everything. So,
Good for you.
but he's one of 3. So, we'll see what happens,
So you're keeping your options open.
Honestly, at this age I really thought I would be remarried and
hmm
in some mobile home park somewhere and grandkids. None of that has happened. And I'm just having fun dating people, and hopefully the right guy will figure it out and say, "Hey, she's the one,"
And it will happen.
So we'll see.
Well, you sound very happy and you sound like you're doing well.
I'm doing great. Yeah. I mean, I'm so lucky and so blessed to be in this industry, aside from working in a supermarket, of course, but I mean, the comedy industry, and people have been so wonderful to me. I've been very, very lucky.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. And good to hear that there's life after divorce. So,
There is life after divorce. You bet there is.
with lots of laughs.
Yes. And lots of love, hopefully.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. This
Thank
has
you.
been
Thank you
great.
for having me.